This is video number 3 and I'm feeling rather pleased with myself. See that tank? That is the GPZ500S tank. I've now got that mounted up properly, securely bolted to the bike. I've done a test drive, I've driven about 2 or 3 miles. Everything seems to be working fine. So I'm rather happy that's this job done. Let's go and have a closer look and I'll show you exactly how I've done it. So, the first thing I did was I fitted these risers to the handlebars. You can see that what that's done is it's shifted the handlebars about 2 inches up, pretty much directly vertical from the previous position. The reason for doing that, look at this. I don't get the fork, doesn't hit the tank. Plenty of room here on the controls. So lifting the handlebars, fitting the risers, gave me clearance there. And look, there's a gap there. I don't get it hitting the tank on full lock here. The terminology for that distance is, in Scotland we call that a bore hair, and when I lived in Australia they called that tiny imperceptible distance. That was called a bee's dick of clearance. Anyway, a miss is as good as a mile. That'll do me. So look at the tank. That's me trying to move it with all my might, and yeah, it does move. It moves about 1 millimetre in each direction. That's just the rubber mounts compressing. The first mount is here at the back, so this uses the original Kawasaki standard rear tank mount, and you can see that I've welded a bar on there for it to bolt to. I'll show you some more. This is it with the tank off. So first thing I did was I made this front tank mount here. These rubbers used to sit on here, same on the other side, and there was a cup underneath of the tank that fitted there. Well, what I've ended up having to do was just make a new version of this, and it's, I don't know if you can see, but it's screwed down. There was an existing captive nut inside here that holds this bracket in, so I've just made this and drilled it into the existing captive nut. If I want to take it off, well, basically I screwed it on then welded it up, so if I want to take it off I'm going to have to angle grind through here to cut this off, and then I can unscrew it. But hey, how often do you need to take your tank mounts off? I'll cross that bridge if and when I actually come to it. And then at the back here you can see this is the original rack that the tank used to sit on. What I've done, this is 3mm plate steel. I've extended the original, well, there's a small pad there, but I've made it a bit bigger. This is rubber sheet that I bought off eBay. So now I've got this here. I glued it down with Evo stick glue, which says it bonds multiple surfaces, but it's come off when I've been pissing about with changing the tank over, so I might have to use a different glue or have another go at that. But yeah, basically I've got these 2 pads here and here. The tank just sits down. There's a flat area of the tank that lines up with these, so it just basically has this nice big fat cushion for the tank to sit on. And then you can see that I've welded this bar here. That's, I don't know, that's what, 8mm thick bar. And then does it photo focus? Yep, there you go. You can see I drilled and tapped the hole to M8 thread, and then with another bit of this 3mm made up a nice big round disc with a big 10mm hole to give it clearance, and that round pad is what the rubber in the tank mount is sits on that. So tank sits on rubber here, sits on rubber here, bolted on rubber here. The entire tank is rubber mounted, which is what it was done as standard. Now I'm no engineer, so I haven't been able to work out weights or anything like that, but the original tank was here and the original tank was bolted on here, and this took most of the weight. So I think that I'm guessing that by keeping the weight here and allowing the weight to sit through this, I'm hoping that that's going to be able to take the weight of it. I made this out of 3mm because, well, I could go up to 5mm. I've got some 5mm plate, but I don't want to add too much steel because steel's heavy, so you don't want to add too much steel to your bike, otherwise the thing weighs a ton. Likewise with this, I do think that this is quite a long section to be unsupported, and in theory I could triangulate from there to make it strong, but on the other hand, I think the weight's going to go through here. I don't think it's going to bend here. If it does, I'll just have to fix it. I'll change it, but hey, I reckon that'll hold. Or at least I'm confident enough to give it a try without having to work out any fancy stresses or anything. Making this was the hardest thing of all. It was a git of a job. It took several nights to do this. So I'll tell you a bit more about this. So these are the tools I used to make that front tank mount. The first thing I did was measure these rubbers. This hole inside here is 14mm diameter. So I ordered some round bar, 14mm diameter. And I also ordered, this is called channel section metal, 3mm thick, 50mm by 50mm by 50mm channel. And I had to buy the biggest drill bit I could find. Now I've got a standard hand drill, and the chuck will go up to 1/2 inch, which is 12.5mm, but we need a 14mm hole, so old school. I had to file the hole out. Got my 2 hand files, and I've got a vise which I inherited from my grandfather. So you can see it took a few goes. Basically I had to drill the holes, file them out, and I had to file them until they were, will this go through with one hand? Yeah, yay. I had to file them out until I could do that. Then I cut the length of this round bar to size, and these rubbers sit on the end. Hey presto, Bob's your uncle, whatever. The only problem is with this one, that distance from there to there was about 10 or 15mm too high, which meant that the whole tank sat too high, so I had to make another one. So that's an evening's work wasted. But you can see I had quite a few goes at this. This one in particular, I used one of my old scrap ones to practice welding, basically to get the settings right on my MIG welder, so that I wasn't going to fuck up the one that had taken me all this time to make. And that's my welder. A very old second-hand beaten up MIG welder. So I'm not an engineer for a living. I don't have access to a big machine shop or any kind of fancy equipment. This is what I've got, and I haven't been trained in engineering or machining or fitting and turning or anything like that. I work in an office. I work at a computer all day. Before that I used to work in construction, and before that I drove commercial vehicles, so I've never had any training in mechanics or in engineering or making up things like this. I've been lucky. I've had lots of good friends show me and help me out, and most of them have known what they were doing, but Don't let a lack of formal training put you off. Have a go. Get the tools, have a go. Join a club of friendly people that will help you out. Do a night class, do whatever you need, but have a go. So, with the, one last thing to tell you. This thing. Don't know if you can see it. That there is a petrol filter. I recommend you get a petrol filter because there's a lot of rubbish, a lot of junk in the tank. The main reason why this took so long to do was the petrol tank. This tank had been in storage for about 10 years, and so it had rusted on the inside and there'd been a build-up of soil. Somehow it had got soil inside it, probably kept in someone's garden shed. So what I did was, before fitting it to the bike, I put in a bit of petrol, flushed it, shook the tank up, shook it around, and then drained the petrol out, and the petrol came out filthy. It came out looking like mud. So what I did was I got a bucket and I got an old cotton bed sheet, and I stretched the bed sheet across the top of the bucket. I poured in more petrol. I took out the petrol tap from underneath of the petrol tank, and so what that did I was flushing all this soil and grit out of the tank. Now, reusing plastic drinks bottles is not a very safe way of storing your petrol, so don't do this at home, kids. But look at this. That and that there, that's all soil and grit that came out of this tank. So what I did was I'd flush the petrol through, I'd filter it through this bed sheet, and then after a while, when it was just too filthy and too dirty, I put it into these bottles, and about 4 or 5 days later all the solid stuff has sunk down. But that, so you imagine that, I've got all of that. See, look at all that fucking horrible filth. See that? All that dirty, solid nastiness. That was all there, ready to block up my carbs. So anybody else, if you're using an old petrol tank that's sat for a while, I strongly recommend that you give it a good flush and a good clean out and check that it's clean before you put it on your bike, because otherwise you're going to block your carbs and give yourself a whole world of pain. And make sure you fit a petrol filter, otherwise, well, that'll just protect your carbs as a last resort. So that's the end of this video, and I've spent an awful lot of time doing this. Making those tank mounts took several nights after work. Came straight out to work without eating anything and then going to bed after midnight. I wasn't very popular, and I've now got lots of jobs to do around the house and in my garden, so I don't think I'm going to do another job on the bike for a while. Next job will probably be the headlights, but I'll come back and do another video about that when they're done. Bye.